Good afternoon to everybody and good morning to our friends in the US. As I said, I will start this conversation, which will conclude the project out of the deadlock security sector reform in the Sahel. This is a project that started last year by Istituto Affari Internazionali in cooperation with the Foundation for European Progressive Studies in Brussels and National Democratic Institute in Washington D.C. with the support of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation and the European Parliament. The IAI has started already a few years ago to investigate the security dynamics in sub-Saharan Africa with a special focus on the Sahel region. And since a few years ago, we started a very fruitful collaboration with the FEPS Foundation in Brussels and NDI in Washington D.C. in cooperation with a number of institutional and individual partners in sub-Saharan Africa. This year, we decided to concentrate on the Sahel region and in particular on the processes for the security sector reform in 3 particular countries, namely Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. This is a follow-up activity to previous research again on the Sahel region and in particular on security and development issues. This time, as I said, we decided to concentrate on SSR, which represents a specific challenge for many countries in the region. But also we try to connect this process with other security processes going on in the region, in particular DDR and the fight against violent extremism. As we all know, the Sahel region is a particularly challenging environment, not only because this region has been affected by several upheavals and crises, including forced displacement of populations due to climate change, governance challenges, repeated periods of drought, and so on and so forth. But also because at national level, many countries in the region suffer from operational and strategic gaps in their capacity, which very often results in vacuum of governance, which are spaces, which become spaces for violent groups and militia. On the other side, we have also multiple actors dealing with security, with very often diverging agendas. And these actors include international actors, first of all, the European Union and the US, which we investigate in particular in this research project, but also regional actors, including ECOWAS, other organizations linked to the African Union, recently the G5 Sahel, and also the Alliance Sahel, plus a number of local actors. This proliferation actors also poses an additional challenge to the construction of a security environment in the region. And then recently, we also faced additional problems arising from the COVID-19 crisis, which have put further strain on the local authorities and also created additional impediments for the external interventions. And this also required a review of mandate for current missions and also for future plans, including by the European Union. Now, given this very complex and very challenging environment, I think the research has done a very good job in investigating the nitty-gritty of security sector reform, but also the specific obstacles for its implementation in Burkina, Mali, and Niger. and also context-specific recipes for successful strategies. And it also put forward some useful recommendations for local governments, for the European Union, and for the international community. In order to achieve this result, investigation has been carried out at local level. We also had a consolidation workshop in Bamako, Mali last November, which represented the opportunity to gather together all relevant actors in Bamako and coming also from the region, including representatives of the Malian government, regional organization, and international missions. And with also the participation of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also the Italian Special Representative for the Sahel. So I think this is a very useful opportunity now to check the result of our joint research and to hear from the contributions, but also from the feedback of all the participants to this roundtable. And I would like to thank in particular the two principal investigators in this project, Bernardo Venturi from IAI and Nana TOURÉ, independent consultant from Bamako. Now just a couple of housekeeping announcements. First of all, I ask everybody to mute your microphones. And then Asli Okiai, my colleague that will chair the next session, will give you more precise instructions on how to intervene in the Q&A session. And also, please note that this event will be recorded. So for those that will not have the opportunity to follow the entire event, you will find it again on the websites of the organizing institutions. So without further ado, I give the floor to my fellow colleagues, and I will start with ULRIKE RODGERS from the National Democratic Institute in Washington, D.C. Uli, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicoletta. And thank you to all the colleagues from YAHI and FEPS who have contributed to this project, and of course a special thanks to Bernardo and Nana for their tireless work on this. As NDI, we are very, very pleased that we've been able to do this program or this project together, which, if I'm not mistaken, is now the third publication that the three partners have done together, the third research with a focus on the Sahel. And you can find the previous fruits of our labor also on YAI's, FEPS, and NDI's websites if you're interested. NDI has been active in the Sahel region with a focus on the three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, since 2014. From the very beginning, we placed an emphasis on strengthening democratic oversight of various government policies pertaining to security in the three countries, and with a particular look towards strengthening the capacities of parliaments and lawmakers to exercise their responsibilities in that sector. Secondly, another priority for NDI is inclusiveness and citizen participation in all aspects of security reforms, security implementation, and the activities of those in the Sahel who are carrying out security in the broader sense. And when we mean inclusiveness, that means all citizens, and particularly women and youth, because they are such a large demographic in the Sahelian countries, yet their voices are underrepresented when it comes to security discussions at all levels, whether it's in the local communities, in the regions, or at the national and policy levels. Fourth, our work has included a large portion on fostering dialogue between citizens and security sector forces in the countries, because as also the research that we have carried out together with our partners has shown, the absence of dialogue is one of the key challenges to building trust and building a mutual understanding for security policies in the three countries. And so since 2014, we've been working on that with the support of a number of donors and governments, including Denmark, the United States State Department, and the National Endowment for Democracy. As I said in the beginning, we're particularly pleased and happy to have this very active collaboration with YAHI and FEPS. And if I may say, especially in times like these, it's very important to look at security from these various angles, and to have, I would say, a triangular, in this case, dialogue between the stakeholders in the Sahel. And the research, as you will see in the publications, has really included a large number of contributors and interviewees coming from a variety of backgrounds, whether it's citizens, parliaments, and in this case, we looked more specifically at the various government institutions that are involved in this. So it's, I think, one of the, I don't want to say rare, but not so common endeavors that really includes partners from those three areas. And I have to say that I find that the result of this is really a very comprehensive and thorough analysis. So with that, I want to conclude my brief remarks, and then I think the next speaker is László Andor from our partner from FEPS. And so I mute my microphone with that, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Indeed, good afternoon. On behalf of FEPS, I would also like to welcome all the participants of this conference. And first of all, I would like to thank the partners, the Istituto Affari Internazionali, or EI, for the excellent collaboration in co-organizing today's event, as well as for the other projects we are developing together. And also the National Democratic Institute in Washington, D.C., and RODGERS in particular, for their contributions, support, and assistance in this project. Following our earlier two projects, which the previous speakers already referred to, which focused on the nexus between security, migration, and development across the Sahel, and tackling mobility, demography, and climate change, respectively, FEPS, YAI, and NDI decided to continue deepening our collective knowledge and research on the governance of security sector reform in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and on its interlinkages with other security processes. FEPS definitely likes challenges. And one key challenge here is the complexity of the matter linked to the instability in the region. I think most participants of this conference know this much better than I do, that the inter-ethnic violence, the community conflicts, and the trans-border activities of non-state armed actors, insurgent jihadist groups, ethnic-based militias, and illegal trafficking networks make Sahel one of the most unstable regions in sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps even in the world. And instability in this region, in fact, is of primary concern for the EU and some of its member states, as it has implications for the management of migration flows as well as the fight against terrorism. But in a way, it's also a challenge that in 2017, at a time when the Sahel region was not in the spotlight of the international community, FEPS chose to focus on it because we saw its tremendous importance for Africa and for Europe at a time when others were not paying so much attention. So in a way, it requires a little bit of a foresight to embark on a long-term research on a topic which for others may not be a priority. But for the European Union, it's clearly a priority. The EU has repeatedly emphasized the Sahel as a strategic priority, as well as the need to stand by the people of the Sahel, who continue to face challenges relating to security, with the expansion of the terrorist threats, of extremist violence, and of organized crime. Further challenges of political nature in terms of development, increased migratory pressure, and aggravated food insecurity, and many more. Today, we could also add COVID, are closely linked with governance and security. Now, this research was guided by the following main questions: how to promote sustainable peace and security in the Sahel, how to implement an inclusive and shared security sector reform, and what role should the EU and other international actors adopt as peace and security partners. What changes we would like to see in the Sahel region is probably easier to define and agree on. I think we all need good governance to pave the way for the rule of law, the upholding of human rights, anti-corruption, control of military and police activities, accountability and transparency, people's active participation in functioning democracies, social and economic development, equality and the empowerment and inclusion of women and vulnerable minorities in society. This list, of course, can be supplemented by further goals, since we believe that for sustainable peace and security, we need a more people-centered, integrated approach, moving away from the traditional approaches focusing on the actions and powers of states. So the good governance, security, and local ownership are the key principles for the analysis of SSR in the Sahel. Now, as most FEPS publications, also this new research is closed by a number of policy recommendations. And we would like to deliver these policy recommendations to the policy makers in the European institutions directly, whether they are in the European Commission or in the European Parliament, where significant related discussions also take place. These policy recommendations here have a clear progressive character, as they urge, for example, to prioritize civil over military solutions, strengthen the accountability and functioning of governance of the national armed forces, but not only, engage civil society, and strongly encourage the inclusion of women in the security sector. The complexity and the nuances of the topic of today's event will probably emerge from the debate, and the hope is that this very interesting study by FEPS, YI, and NDI will help to feed the debate and the reflections around the questions of security in this region and of the relations between the European Union and its African partners, as well as the role of the European Union in this region in general. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion today.
If I may jump in as the chair of the second session, now we give the floor to MAURO Lorenzini, as concluding the opening remarks, let's say, from the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Please, the floor is yours.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Mauro Lorenzini. I'm the head of the Central and Western Africa desk at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. My job this evening is very easy because First of all, I would like to thank the Istituto Affari Internazionali and the other partners participating in this project, the third project dedicated to the Sahel, and which is part of the broader program financed by the Ministry. And this collaboration with think tanks, and in particular with YAI, has been very fruitful, I have to say, and very useful for us at the Ministry for a better knowledge and for having at disposal many tools for better understanding situations. Has been already underlined that the situation in the Sahel is extremely complex. And this study, I went through the study this afternoon, and I can see that it's a very interesting contribution to a deepened and detailed analysis of the situation in the Sahel. It's focused on the security reform, but is linking the security aspects to many other aspects that are typical and particular of the local situation that very often goes overlooked. So it's an interesting contribution to have a more complex analysis of the phenomena on the terrain. And it jumps also to a very specific conclusions, I have to say, which are mainly focused on the unbalance of the response to the security problem now in the Sahel. That is, according to the study, very centered on military and securitarian aspects of the response, and it should be integrated by more attention to the civil measures and to all the other aspects more related to the social, ethnical, cultural, historical root causes of the instability. And this is, I think, a very interesting contribution. It's very detailed. The recommendations are extremely interesting, and I like the fact that they are like divided according recommendation for the local governments, the EU, the international partners, but basically all center about this point of trying to give more attention to the civil measures, to those aspects that are more related to the social and political dynamics of these countries. Again, countries that are very complex under many aspects, under the ethnical composition aspects, under the religious aspects, and they are facing many challenges that are not just the challenges related to the security, but unfortunately are related to many other factors like the climate change, the economic dynamics that is changing. So very complex situation, and that has been very well reflected in the study and in the recommendation, that I think will be very useful for the decision making at all levels. Having said that, I'm looking forward for the presentation of the study and for the debates. Also because for us, for Italy, the Sahel is of course a priority. Our presence in the region is recent, but is growing. And I just said that we opened 2 embassies. We are in the process of considering opening an embassy in Mali. As you know, there is a military training mission in Niger, and development projects in all the 5 countries of the G5. And as you know, the latest development is the creation, the institution of this new coalition for the Sahel, launched by the French, and we are going to participate to the coalition and to the new activities that the coalition is going to promote in the region. So thank you. Sorry again for the technical problem, and I'm looking forward for the presentation of the study. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And okay, let me thank you again very quickly. Repeat my thanks to all of you for being here. And we are all very much interested to hear in further detail the results of this research and of this project, which actually will help us, we hope, obviously, to understand this complexity. No need to repeat that, this complex situation in the Sahel, and we would also be very interested to hear the recommendations and debate altogether afterwards. So without further delaying, let me introduce first, we will have our presentations by the principal investigators, Nana Touré and Bernardo Venturi. Afterwards, we will have our discussant, Ottilia Manganidze, to comment on the presentations and the research, and we will then open up the floor before concluding. So firstly, our principal investigators and the presenters today, we will first have Nana Touré, who is a sociologist and independent consultant based in Bamako. Nana's work focuses on development policies and practices. And to let you know all, Nana will make her presentation in French, but we will have a consecutive translation to English, so that we all understand. And then also in the question and answer session, our translators will help us to direct questions to Nana. And then we will have Bernardo Venturi following Nana, who is a senior fellow at the Istituto Affari Internazionali. Bernardo coordinates our work at the Institute on Africa in general, but particularly he focuses on civilian crisis management, CFSP, CSDP, peace building and development. Nana and Bernardo, you will have 15 minutes each. So we will have a half an hour for the presentation. Then we will go to the discussion. Unfortunately, we had to have a little change in the program. Elena Ursu, Anka Elena Ursu, for unforeseeable an emergency that was unforeseeable, she won't be able to join us today in this meeting, in this round table. But we have the honor of having Ottilia Manganidze, our distinguished discussant from the Institute for Security Studies. Ottilia has been with the ISS for since 2009, if I'm not mistaken, and she's currently the head of special projects in the Office of the Executive Director. Her areas of interest are international criminal justice, international human rights law, and migration trends and policies, which I am particularly interested in. So Ottilia, you will have, after the presentations, 10 minutes, perhaps a couple of minutes. After your comments and your intervention, we will turn to Bernardo and Nana if they would like to quickly respond, react, or add something. And then we will open up the floor to the question and answers. For that, we have about half an hour, 35 minutes. So I please kindly ask everybody to keep their questions and comments brief and concise so that we can have as many questions as possible. And as we are doing this all online, when you want to ask a question, please, I kindly ask you to use the raise hand function of Zoom or the chat function. From the chat, you can also write that you would like to ask a question. And then we will give back the word to ULRIKE RODGERS from the NDI, who will conclude briefly, give us some concluding remarks. And we are all looking forward for this debate. So Nana, the floor is yours.
Bonjour à tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de prendre la parole et partager avec vous quelques éléments saillants avec mon collaborateur Bernardo sur l'étude que nous avons menée dans 3 pays du Sahel, à savoir le Mali, le Burkina et le Niger, sur l'impact sécuritaire dans le Sahel. Donc, tout d'abord, en termes d'éléments de méthodologie, nous avons opté pour une approche qualitative qui était basée à la fois sur une analyse documentaire et sur la recherche de terrain. Au total, nous avons mené 31 entretiens au Burkina, au Mali et au Niger avec des universitaires, des agents de la sécurité nationaux et étrangers, des activistes, des journalistes, des employés diplomatiques, et un atelier de consolidation a eu lieu à Bamako en novembre 2019 dans le but de présenter justement les premiers résultats de cette étude et recueillir également les réactions et commentaires d'environ une trentaine de personnes qui étaient des participants à cet atelier qui avait eu lieu à Bamako.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here today with you to show you some of the results of the study carried out together with Bernardo. The methodology adopted for this study was based both on a documentary analysis and on field research. The authors conducted 31 interviews in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger with academics, national and foreign security agents, activists, journalists, and diplomatic staff. A consolidation workshop was held in Bamako in November 2019 in order to present the initial results of the study and collect feedback and comments from about 30 key regional stakeholders from research centers, NGOs, international organizations, and government institutions.
Ok, très bien. Maintenant, parlant de RSS et de DER au Burkina Faso, au Mali et au Niger, on ne saurait parler de ça sans parler d'abord de la crise humanitaire, ensuite les autres facettes de la crise au Sahel. Donc, par rapport à la crise humanitaire, dans les régions du Sahel, le contexte sécuritaire est quand même marqué au jour d'aujourd'hui par l'émergence des groupes extrémistes violents et des conflits locaux, le trafic de tout genre. Ces phénomènes embrigueux ont profondément affecté les communautés, de même que les gouvernements, à travers des conséquences sociales, économiques, sanitaires, et le tout ayant conduit à des situations humanitaires sans précédent pour ces différents pays. Donc, il est constaté des menaces contre les populations, des attaques terroristes et des violences basées sur le genre, des attaques contre les dirigeants locaux et les autorités nationales, des difficultés d'accès aux centres de santé, aux marchés et des lieux de culte, etc.
While talking on SSR and DDR in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, we have to focus on the humanitarian security crisis in the Sahel region. In this region, the security context is characterized by the emergence of violent extremist groups, local conflicts, and trafficking of all kinds. And these intertwined phenomena have deeply affected communities as well as governments due to their social, economic, and health consequences. All this has led to unprecedented humanitarian situations. And in these countries, there's been threats against population, terrorist attacks against the civilians, gender-based violence, attacks against local leaders and national authorities, as well as difficulties of access to health centers, school, markets, places of worship, as well as a number of other problems.
Donc, quant à la situation de la RSS et de DDR au Mali, au Burkina Faso, il faut tout d'abord noter que les États du Burkina, du Mali et du Niger, pour faire face à ces situations d'insécurité, ont mis en place plusieurs initiatives sécuritaires. Au Burkina et au Niger, il n'y a pas eu de processus officiel, il faut le dire, de réforme du secteur de la sécurité comme ça a été le cas au Mali. Au Niger, le gouvernement a été assez longtemps réticent par rapport à l'utilisation du concept réforme et a utilisé l'expression gouvernance du secteur de la sécurité pour pouvoir apporter des changements. Au Burkina, la chute du président Compaoré a favorisé une remise en question du secteur de la sécurité. En dépit de ces initiatives sécuritaires, l'insécurité règne quand même dans toutes les régions du Sahel, mais à des degrés, peut-être à des manifestations différentes. Il convient aussi de dire que l'objectif visé par la réforme du secteur de la sécurité est une gouvernance démocratique du secteur de la sécurité, qui est la gestion et le contrôle du secteur de la sécurité sur la base des principes et valeurs de démocratie.
In order to address all these situations of insecurity, the states of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have put in place several security initiatives. In Burkina Faso and Niger, unlike Mali, there has been no formal security sector reform process. In Niger, the government has been reluctant to use the concept of reform for quite a long time, using the term security sector governance in order to bring about change. In Burkina Faso, the fall of President Compaoré has led to a rethinking of the security sector. Despite its various security initiatives, insecurity reigns in all these regions of the Sahel to different degrees. And the SSR objective is democratic governance of the security sector, which is the management and control of the security sector based on the principles of values of democracy in people's interest. These processes are multidimensional and include many social, political, military, and budgetary goals, which are part of the overall peace and recovery strategy.
Maintenant, pour ce qui concerne les processus de DDR, il faut noter qu'ils sont multidimensionnels et comprennent une multitude d'objectifs sociaux, économiques, politiques, militaires et ou budgétaires également, et qui font partie de la stratégie globale de paix et de relèvement. Il ressort de nos entretiens, les entretiens que nous avons effectués pour cette recherche, que les trois pays sont dans une dynamique de réforme et leur système de sécurité, de désarmement et de démobilisation afin de rendre plus approprié et plus inclusif ces processus. En ce qui concerne encore le DDR, il est lié dans le contexte sahélien à la RSS. Les deux sont interdépendants et se renforcent mutuellement et devraient se dérouler de manière vraiment coordonnée. Et la question centrale concerne les approches et les stratégies à mettre de l'avant susceptibles de réduire les risques liés à l'implication des acteurs armés étatiques au sein des armées nationales. Et dans le même ordre d'idées, il a été souligné au cours des entretiens que pour le DDR, il n'y a pas de méthode unique.
With specific reference to the DDR processes, the interviews we have conducted for this research indicate that all the three countries are in the process of reforming their security, disarmament, and demobilization systems to make them more appropriate and inclusive. These processes, the SSR processes of the three countries, are taking place in the context of the armies inherited from colonial times, which are ill-suited to effectively address current security needs. And security is not only a military or a technical issue. In the Sahel context, DDR is linked to SSR. The two are interdependent, mutually reinforcing, and should be carried out in a coordinated manner. The central issue is the approach and the strategy to be put forward for reducing the risk associated with the involvement of non-armed actors in national armies. And it was also stressed during the interviews that there is no single approach to DDR. For example, in Niger, after military attacks, specific measures are taken, such as construction of wells, watering places for animals, and rehabilitation of markets.
OK. Maintenant, pour parler des enjeux, je vais peut-être pas trop m'appesantir sur ça, vu qu'on a le document, mais peut-être seulement de noter deux éléments ici par rapport aux enjeux liés à la RSS dans les trois pays. C'est surtout le manque d'approche pratique qui favorise l'appropriation et la mise en œuvre de la RSS, et le manque aussi ou l'insuffisance de volonté politique de la part des décideurs à mettre en œuvre les différents engagements sous-régionaux et internationaux qui sont signés et ratifiés par les trois États concernés.
With specific reference to the challenges and choices, I would like to focus especially on the problem of sometimes the lack of political will, also at sub-regional level, in order to implement these measures.
Okay. Maintenant, je vais peut-être parler un tout petit peu du rôle des groupes armés et non étatiques dans cette zone, surtout dans la région du Liptako-Gourma. Ces groupes armés non étatiques, plus les groupes extrémistes, sont principalement des groupes d'autodéfense dans la zone du Liptako-Gourma, au Mali et au Burkina Faso. On a le Dana Agassagou qui est au Mali et Goel Group, qui pour le Burkina Faso, ces groupes sont accusés de commettre des exactions sur les communautés. Pour le cas du Mali, il y a aussi d'autres groupes armés qui sont signataires de l'accord pour la paix et la réconciliation ici du processus d'Alger. Ces groupes sont principalement les principaux mouvements de la coordination des mouvements de l'Azawad, le SEMA, la coordination et la plateforme des groupes armés. Au Burkina, il y a de nombreux comités locaux qui sont appelés les CLS, qui sont placés sous la responsabilité du ministère de la Sécurité. En effet, un décret, même en mai 2005, un décret a été créé dans chaque village et chaque secteur de commune du Burkina Faso un groupe de ce genre. Et ce comité est un comité consultatif dans les dispositions qui ont été rédigées par le gouvernement et un cadre de concertation entre les services de sécurité et les populations locales. Il est placé sous la tutelle du préfet ou du maire. C'est dans le cadre de ces groupes également qu'on trouve un ancrage institutionnel. C'est dans ce cadre qu'on trouve un ancrage institutionnel et bénéficie de ce fait du soutien du gouvernement au Burkina Faso, car les comités locaux de sécurité ont été créés par l'État lui-même selon certains interlocuteurs, bien sûr. Au Mali, il existe également des travaux qui abordent le soutien de l'État à certains groupes armés dans le cadre des initiatives de la lutte contre le terrorisme. Et dans ces travaux, l'on peut constater que ce sont les autorités assez souvent qui encouragent la création de ces groupes dans ces différentes zones où l'État s'est fait de plus en plus absent.
Again, with reference to the challenges we face in the region, and particularly I like to focus on the Liptako-Gourma region, where besides the extremist groups, non-state armed groups are mainly self-defense ones present in Mali and Burkina Faso. These groups are accused of committing abuses against the communities. In the Mali case, there are also armed groups, some of which are signatories to the peace agreement, notably the main movements of the Coordination de Mouvement de l'Azawad and the platform of armed groups. In Burkina Faso, there are many local security committees under the responsibility of the Ministry of Security. In fact, a decree of May 2005 created a local security committee in each village and community in Burkina Faso. This committee is a consultative body and a framework for consultation between security services and the local population. It is placed under the supervision of the prefect or the mayor. It is within the framework of these local security committees that most of these groups have found institutional anchorage and thus benefit from the tacit support of the Burkina government, since the local security committees were created by the state itself. In Mali, there is also work dealing with state support for certain armed groups in the context of initiatives to combat terrorist groups. In this work, we can also see that the authorities often encourage the creation of these groups.
Je vais aller directement aux éléments de recommandation pour boucler. Donc, sur cette base, nous émettons quand même quelques recommandations pour le Sahel. Mon collègue Bernardo va continuer pour vous parler du reste. Maintenant, quelques éléments de recommandation. D'abord, il faut continuer à mettre en œuvre la RSS et des domaines afférents d'action étatique sur la base suivante. D'abord, la mise en œuvre intégrale des droits de l'homme et des droits civils et des droits civiques, et aussi de séparer les pouvoirs, la poursuite pénale systématique des actions de corruption, la subordination et du favoritisme, garantir également la protection physique de la population et la présence des forces armées étatiques sur tout le terrorisme.
With specific reference to the recommendations, just to summarize what I said so far, we have issued some recommendations to the governments of the Sahel region. For example, to continue to implement SSR and the related areas of state action on the following basis: the full implementation of human and civil rights, the genuine separation of powers, the systematic criminal prosecution of corruption and bribery, and the guarantee of the physical protection of the population with the presence of state armed forces throughout the country.
Okay. Ensuite, associer la réforme du secteur de la sécurité au renforcement des services sociaux de base, comme par exemple l'éducation, la santé, pour répondre aux besoins locaux et améliorer la cohésion sociale.
We also want to link SSR to the strengthening of public services such as education and health to meet the local needs and improve social cohesion.
Et renforcer le rôle de la société civile dans la révision des réformes de la sécurité pour améliorer l'efficacité et la durabilité dans des consultations inclusives.
Another recommendation is to strengthen the role of civil society in the review and revision of security reforms in order to improve efficiency and sustainability through inclusive consultations.
Il s'agit là aussi d'inclure un plus grand nombre de femmes dans les initiatives du secteur de la sécurité, c'est-à-dire les femmes sont toujours en minorité dans toutes les branches de la sécurité, même si nous avons pu noter quelques améliorations pendant la réalisation de cette étude. Il convient quand même de privilégier le recrutement et les responsabilités des femmes, ainsi que l'intégration de la dimension genre dans tout ce qui est processus de paix.
Another important recommendation is to include more women in the security sector, because women are always a minority in all the branches of the security. Even though we have recorded some improvements in present time, priority should be given to the recruitment and empowerment of women, as well as gender mainstreaming.
Veiller au respect des droits fondamentaux des populations civiles en évitant l'utilisation des enfants soldats, les attaques volontaires contre la population civile, les viols et autres formes de violences sexuelles à l'égard des femmes et des filles, et les prises d'otages, les mauvais traitements inhumains et dégradants, la destruction des moyens de subsistance des populations civiles, la fermeture des écoles. Ces recommandations sont beaucoup plus destinées aux groupes armés non étatiques qui commettent des exactions sur les populations civiles. Cette partie des recommandations, bien sûr.
We also need to ensure respect for the fundamental rights of the civilian population by avoiding the use of child soldiers, the deliberate attacks of the civilian population, rapes, other forms of sexual harassment and violence against women and girls, hostage-taking, inhuman and degrading ill treatment and abuse, the destruction of the means and resources to ensure the livelihood of the civilian population.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Bernardo, the floor is yours. 15 minutes also for you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ashley, and many thanks, Nana, for presenting the first, very clearly, the first finding of our research. And thanks to all the participants that join us today online. I go straight to the presentation. I will divide the second part of the research in 4 parts. I will start with the role of the EU in SSR in the Sahel, and then I will move to the role of the other international actors. And then I will focus on 2 key concepts that emerge from these investigations that are the stabilization and militarization. And finally, I will complement the conclusion and recommendation already introduced by Nana. So let's start from the role of the EU in SSR in the Sahel. The Sahel is clearly a key area also for the European Union, and generally is also considered, especially recently, part of the extended neighborhood, and will continue to play a key role in the new plan, the new strategy of the EU-Africa relations in the coming years, as already the new Commission mentioned several times. The presence and the role of the EU is changed significantly in the last years, and in particular since 2015, when the CSDP mission, so the civilian, the military mission, the 3 missions that the EU is deploying in Niger and Mali, they change the goal and focus, especially due to the so-called migration crisis. I mentioned that because this is a clear shift of the priorities of the EU from long-term planning to more short-term achievement. security sector reform is clearly a priority for the EU in this area, but some needs, some engagement, some commitment are really have changed the perspective, and now it's more on short-term achievements and long-term goals, as it should be. Security sector reform that cannot be achieved overnight. You heard from Nana as also the definition of security sector reform is problematic in some countries. I would like to focus here on concerning the EU on two specific aspects that are pivotal for security sector reform according to the OECD. And the first one is ownership, local ownership, and the second one is effectiveness and accountability. In terms of local ownership, it's barely mentioned in EU documents, but we can say that it's a cross-cutting topic that is emerging between the political lines of action of the EU. We should mention that the CSDP missions working on security sector reform, they have mandates that are non-executive. That it means that basically the EU is not authorized to conduct governmental tasks. So it's just supporting, advising, mentoring, but of course it's not ruling. That's already an important step in terms of local ownership. But sometimes there is a bit of confusion, for instance, in what local means: national, regional, African, governmental, non-governmental. So the concept of local should be clarified to improve ownership in the Sahel. And then there is another issue, it's important, related to ownership, that is in terms of handover, especially the EUTM mission, the training mission. The handover on training is really problematic because it's not planned. There are some improvement. At the beginning, the EU was just training the forces, police and military forces directly. Now it's more structured as training for trainers. That's already a good way to work on ownership. But at the same time, it needs some improvements in terms of planning a handover and planning how the local government will have full control of the training in the future. And then in terms of effectiveness and accountability, it emerged quite clearly that the local government struggled to provide effective security and justice services to the population, as now very well described. And the EU works on technical and political level to support these areas. But there still are some, first of all, some small progress, let's say, in terms of governance and state building framework. And then there's a limited inclusion of local population and their needs in the analysis and in the EU's action. And this is a risk to hamper the efforts. So a strong focus on technical aspects without real deep analysis on the needs of the population, as Councillor Lorenzini mentioned, that's risk to be a strong limitation. And another limitation is in terms of monitoring and military monitoring and evaluation. That is improving in Brussels, but it's still really ad hoc and not systematic, especially on military training. The level of oversight is really low. And that's remains a significant limitation to the overall work of the mission. For instance, the human rights violations committed by local armies, national armies, like the Malian armies or Nigerian army, are reported by newsmen regularly, even a couple of months ago. And part of these soldiers were trained by the EU, even by the other international actors, but no correlation is done and no real connections is done. So it's no mandatory mission. Of course, the EU is just training, but some connection should be done, and the EU should pay more attention in monitoring even the action of the people that are trained by EU missions. Even other episodes are happening and going on, especially in the last months, also in terms of training and equipment. We have seen as some armored vehicles that were literally paid by the EU or by other international actors were captured by radicalized group, and but the literature and the policy making about that is very limited. So a closer eye should be paid to these episodes that are not just episodes, but are happening every week. And then two additional issues on the EU action in the Sahel. The first one is that the EU is working with an integrated approach that is well connecting development, security in the region, but at the same time, sometimes there is no clarity about what is security, what is development. So the nexus is necessary, but what is not necessary is to have a gray zone that attract criticism and political attention. It's almost devoid to security, and the risk is not to be transparent and to have development money that are supported, that are supporting security infrastructure or infrastructure for security forces. And that's a gray zone that should be avoided in future planning. The final word about the EU is in terms of regionalizations of the efforts, especially when it comes to terrorism. Regionalization, on the one hand, is fine because, of course, we know very well that the borders are porous and groups are moving through the Liptako-Burma region, the through borders area. But at the same time, the local government, the local authorities should stick to their responsibility at the national level. And the risk is that international forces are fighting against an enemy that is transnational, so not easy to identify, but and the local government are not accountable because they are not. There's not a focus at the national level. So that's another risk that should be avoided. In terms of other, of course, the EU is not the only actor in town. There are several actors there. The UN mission and several MINUSMA and several others. I just want to mention here to highlight how the African actors are or can be in the future relevant. We know very well that the G5 is there, so this coalition of the 5 narrow Sahel countries, and that's very useful for the international actor to channel resources and political support in this ad hoc coalition. But this is creating some contrast with other regional organizations like ECOWAS, the West Africa Western organization that basically is contesting the role of G5. They really want to have a major role, political but also military role. And we have to keep this into the picture. And then we also have the African Union, that they have a political role, but at the same time, in the last month, they said many times that they do want also to have a security role in the region. And as an African analyst recently said, perhaps the role of the EU is, if they want to be genuinely useful, the African Union should bring order and not add other security forces, other troops, but bring order to who is there in terms of local ownership, but even in terms of coordination. It is not enough, but can be very, very useful. In terms of other countries, we have several European members that are committed in this region, multilaterally, but also bilaterally. We heard about Italy in the welcoming remarks. We found out that really Italy is interested and engaged and is having an increasing role in the region. But at the same time, it still needs to learn a lot about local dynamics, and perhaps the new embassies will help in that. And who knows, perhaps also a future embassy in Mali will be very, very useful to have a full picture of local actors and local dynamics. There are similar dynamics with Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. And I don't want to get into detail of each of that. What I can say as an overall comment is that there is a growing support military action, and the Coalition pour le Sahel, the new force with the task force Takuba, is really focused on military action, and the risk is to escalate the situation there. And I want to conclude from this, like a bridge on this issue on growing engagement on militarization from the European member states, analyzing two concepts. One is the concept of stability, and the other is the same of the own concept of militarization. In terms of stability, I think that from our research emerged that stability is that problematic because of what is stable. Sometimes we hear about bringing the state back, but we should be aware that the state has never been present in some part of these countries. And so stability, the risk of stabilization is to support who is in power and to be really conservative to some extent. And also, this is also a problem of perceptions of local actors of the opposition. I'm thinking to the current protests in Mali that are taking place, just take place last weekend against the government. The risk is to support the establishment and to hamper genuine change at the local level. The second concept is about militarization, because as Mr. Lorenzini highlighted at the beginning, militarization is really gaining floor, gaining space, and that is a risk, because some dynamics are not just fighting terrorism. Terrorism is rooted in local support, and local support is there mainly because the state is weak. The state is weak in terms of public services and public space, and that should be taken into account. So the EU should continue in terms of recommendation, and I will conclude in a minute, to support comprehensive security sector reform, but avoiding a merely technical approach, should focus on local ownership and engage with more with civil society at all levels, improve its monitoring and evaluation systems, also on military training, and support military intervention as a last resort. In terms of international community, should be given priority to civil measures that are really really important, also in terms, I think, to mediation, to civil development cooperation, and to the ownership of local actors in this process. And finally, the role of regional organizations like ECOWAS should be really taken into the picture also by international actors. And I stop here, and I'm looking forward to hear comments by the discussant and questions from the participants. Thanks.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Bernardo. And immediately, without losing any time, we proceed with Ottilia Manganitze's comments. 10 minutes, and perhaps we will open the floor right afterwards. Bernardo and Anna can react with the first responses. Thank you very much, Ottilia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Asli. And, you know, to begin, I would like to thank both Nana and Bernardo, not only for their presentations now, but I think for the hard work in actually putting this report together and bringing across these points. My job now is a little bit difficult because it's responding to, you know, long-term study that has been done and really critical inputs, I think, from both authors, and to do that in 10 minutes, but I will try. So firstly, you know, I think I would like to just emphasize that a lot of what I'm going to say is really, in many regards, reinforcing what has already been said, both by Nana as well as Bernardo, and perhaps adding a little bit. And these are my then reflections on this research, but perhaps what is more important is after the research, the work that needs to come after that. So beyond us looking at what are the key issues here, then really thinking more concretely around what ought to happen. So what I'm going to do so that I can use my time properly is I'm going to split my remarks. First, I'm going to look at the regions, as it were, and I'm very specific about referring to regions and not a region, and you'll understand why in a moment. And then I'm going to look into the key issues needing response that are covered in the report, and for which any form of security sector reform, or as the Nigerians would prefer, security sector governance, what it is exactly it's looking at primarily. And then I'm going to go into what I would like to term, having listened to Nana and having listened to Bernardo and having read the report, societal reform, and what that actually looks like, and how challenging that may be. And then to go into who the actors are. So it's almost as if I'm ending with the actors rather than starting with them. But maybe as I speak, you know, those of you listening in can also reflect on who the actors ought to be. And then finally, the approach. And I will try to do that in 8 minutes that I'm left with now. So first, you know, we've been talking primarily around Burkina Faso, specifically Niger and Mali, as being countries that are part of the Sahel. And Bernardo has mentioned, obviously, you know, the more concentrated group of 5 countries that form the G5 Sahel. But I like to think of these countries, as I do with the rest of the continent, as countries within a broader neighborhood. A broader neighborhood, if you're to take the whole continent of 55 member states of the African Union. But in this case, we're looking not only at the Sahel, but we also ought to look at the Lake Chad Basin. And as has been said by Nana so perfectly, also looking at particular dynamics in regions such as the Liptako-Gourma, and further going into the coastal nations and North Africa. Why is it important to look at these as well and not just to have the tunnel vision? Because the reality is, and going on to the issues now, the reality is the threats that these countries face and the kind of reforms that they need are actually not concentrated only at local nor at national level. It doesn't help to have the right kind of security sector reform or action in Niger if Mali doesn't have it, if Burkina Faso doesn't have it, and most definitely not if Chad, Mauritania, Nigeria, Cameroon, and the neighboring countries do not have that same kind of security sector governance or reform. The reason it doesn't is because criminal actors, once they see that a particular area is harder for them to be able to infiltrate, will simply move on to the next. And we've seen that since 2016, for example, the terror threats, particularly in the Sahel, have increased 5-fold. So we're looking at countries that are dealing with greater threats than they had to deal with in 2016, and definitely that they had to deal with even before then. How then do you ensure the right kind of reform in these countries in a way that actually helps to build? I use a really horrible analogy of trying to fix a moving car. So as you're going forward and you're trying to get to somewhere, whether it's the stability that Bernardo speaks about, whether it's the security and the coherence in society that Nana speaks about, you're trying to achieve that while your car keeps breaking down, but you don't want to stop it. You don't want to stop to actually check what the problems are and to deal with them as you go. The result is you may have short-term gains, but you will definitely have long-term stressors. And we see that now in the G5 Sahel area, but we see it in the broader Lake Chad Basin, North Africa, and the Greater Sahara. And we then have to look at what are the things that have made it difficult for us to really respond so far. And it's been alluded to already. The focus in the regions has been on hard security. It's been about responding to a terrorist threat, whether through military or even through the support of other security services. But it's been about security. It has been less about ensuring community coherence. It has been less about ensuring alternatives to criminal activity. It has been less about ensuring that even those actors that are meant to be promoting stability in those countries are not themselves actually fueling tensions in communities and beyond. It's been about, let's arm the soldiers, let's arm the police, and let them respond into a society that clearly is suffering as a result of the conflict. And so how do you ensure the comprehensive security sector reform that Bernardo speaks about? And how do you do it without not making it just about technical security support? A lot of this is already in the report. So I urge you to read the report and look at the key recommendations, not just to the European Union or to the specific countries themselves, but to the greater community. And this is when I speak about what I call societal reform. Nana spoke about the inclusion of women and youth, for example. The reality is, in a region like the three countries specifically, but the Greater Sahel, you can't help but have to include women and the youth. In a country like Niger that has a median age of 14, how can you have any form of societal intervention that does not include the youth, when the youth are the majority of that country? You simply have to have them not just as beneficiaries of the services, but key actors in the action that needs to be in place. Nana also spoke about social cohesion, and I can't help but underline this point. Without social cohesion, whatever efforts you put in place are, again, short-lived, but not long sustained. And that also brings in the point of local ownership, inclusivity, consultation, not only at adoption level, but at the actual offset or onset of any demobilization, demilitarization and reintegration programs, and the broader security sector reform that needs to be in place. Because whatever efforts are done have to be long-term and they have to be sustainable. But importantly, they have to be legitimate. If they're not legitimate, and by legitimate, it's not about Otilia sitting in South Africa thinking that this is a good plan. It's about a woman in a place like Agadez in Niger feeling that this is an activity that responds to the needs of their society and that addresses the threats that they face. So who are the actors? And I'm now going near to my conclusion. I know that I've got a minute and a half to go. We're looking at the local, the national, the regional, and then we're looking at external actors. I've spoken already about who the local are. It is the women, it is the children, but it is also the young men and the older men within those societies that have to live with these threats and that need security sector reform to work for them. Security sector reform, again, doesn't have to work for me sitting in Southern Africa. It has to work for those communities. The national actors then are the state itself and the various security forces. And this is not just the military, it includes the police, it also includes the gendarmes and any other agencies of the force, of the state rather, that are meant to be there to ensure stability and security. The regional actors are the G5 Sahel. They're the multinational joint task force that covers part of these Sahelian countries, but is focused primarily on dealing with the threat of Boko Haram in Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad. There are also the Lake Chad Basin Commission. They are the Conseil de l'Entente. They are the Economic Community of West African States and the African Union. That's a lot of acronyms in a small region. And so what's needed is to ensure coordination, coherence, and collaboration between all of these actors. Then the external, it's the European Union, it's individual member states of the European Union with their own interests within those regions. France has been mentioned, I won't state it again, but it is an actor within those countries. It's also the UN and the UN mission in Mali specifically, but also in the Greater Sahel, and its other international actors. But there's a group of actors that we've only touched on briefly that needs to be in some way involved as well. And these are the criminal actors in the region. Again, they ignore all the action that we work to do to ensure stability and security in these regions, but without finding ways to disintegrate these groups, we will do very little. Again, it's trying to change the tire of a moving car. These criminal actors are Katiba Messina, Ansar Dine, the Movement for Unity and the Jihad in West Africa. They're the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. They're Ansar Islam, Al-Qaeda, and they're bandits and other local groups that are working in those areas. And these are groups that need to be understood when we speak about security sector reform. And then my last point, Chair, as I conclude, is what do we need to be looking at in terms of security sector governance? We need to be looking at beyond security only. It seems almost incorrect to speak about security sector reform and then say, let's look beyond security. Because ideally, that security sector reform ought to ensure peace. It ought to ensure stability, and it ought to ensure that conditions are conducive for sustainable development in those areas and avoidance of insecurity in those areas. We need to look beyond violent extremism and look at responses that aren't only targeted at responding to the terrorist threat in those countries. And then we need to look at lessons from other regions. What has failed in Central Africa in security sector reform in the DRC or the Central African Republic? What has failed in Nigeria and Cameroon in dealing with the threat of Boko Haram? And what has failed in Libya in dealing with security sector reform there? Sorry, Chair, I took a minute or two longer. Thank you for your patience.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Ottilia. It was, I mean, you wrapped up everything very nicely and concisely. And now, without any further delay, let's go open the floor for the to the audience. I don't see any raised hands or the chat, but am I the one that is not able to see them? Perhaps we can start with Bernardo and Nana for their first reactions after Ottilia's comments. And maybe if you have 2 minutes each, and in the meantime, the audience can gather their thoughts and prepare their questions. Bernardo, Nana, would you like to react? A quick reaction of 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Just a couple of comments on Ottilia's points that were extremely useful and precise. And I cannot agree more on the concept of societal reform that is really presenting all the aspects of a society and not just security as something that is down there and is not integrated with the other concepts. And this, it's curious that I heard the analogy of the broken car different times during the interviews in Mali. And the idea that the EU and other international actors have is really to move forward, even if there are problems, even if they cannot fix some troubles now, they should move forward. So exactly the opposite of what Ottilia's presents, so to focus on the fixing the trouble, the problems before. And secondly, I would like to highlight the point about youth. because having the youth on board sometimes is just in terms of, I don't want to say decoration, but just consulted or informed. I think the youth should be in an upper level, so it should be part of the decision making and should be really involved in all the political and social processes, and that's fundamental, not just in terms of information or decoration of a nice room with some youth, but in terms of decision, of listening and decision making. Thanks.
So please, the person who raised the hand, please go ahead and ask your question. I think I saw one.
I think it's Paul Melly here from Chatham House.
Okay, great. Thank you. Please go ahead.
And this is really a question for all of your panelists, but perhaps particularly for Nana, if her connection is there. One has a cliched impression that people often will tell you in the Sahel that the Nigerian army is the most professional, if you like, the most tied by a sense of discipline and understanding and its role in society, and that at the other end of the scale, the Malian army is the most fragile and the least disciplined and the least rigorous in terms of respect for human rights and the communities where it's operating, and that in Burkina, the army is in a sort of phase of transition because, of course, the structures put in place under the Compaoré regime have disappeared to some extent. Do you think those perceptions are a fair reading of the condition of these three Sahel militaries, or do you think that they're unfair, or that people are being too kind or too favorable to the Nigerian forces in that analysis, which I've heard very often from lots of different people? Thank you.
Perhaps we can collect. There was also a hand up from Marius Mufuta. If you would like to take the floor and ask your question, maybe after these two questions we can do a round, and then in the meantime we collect more questions. Marius, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Marius from NDI. I was more interested to know whether when you were conducting the research, you tried to look at the possibility that when there is the DDR process at some point, there's a group of people or militants who will accept to lay down their weapons, but because the condition or the social condition for their reintegration are not achieved, they are more likely to go back to take the guns, because they think that whenever they have gun, they are in a more social position that is beneficiary to them. And I will point you to the multiple examples in the region, in South Sudan, in Congo, in Angola. If we go back to the civil war, actually even in Sierra Leone, we had all those security reform, but because the DDR process did not achieve what was decided, even actually with the peace framework in Congo, people decided to go back to war. So that was my first question. My second question is, did you maybe try to make a difference between doing a security reform in post-conflict society or post-conflict war and the security reform in a normal society where, for example, we are trying to create, I would say, trust between the security sector and the civilian, because sometimes it's really, really different when we don't do that kind of separation, that a country that is coming in post-conflict, the security reform is always difficult because it's an agreed form of a security reform based on a peace agreement, because you want to just create peace, which is different from a security reform that is just done on the purpose of creating trust between the security people within the community and the civilians. So sometimes that might lead to misconception And that's why sometimes we don't succeed in that area. Thank you.
Bernardo, we have another question. Would you like, because we have, I think, 5 to 7 minutes maximum before we give the final word to Uli. So perhaps we take this third question and you respond, and then we proceed directly. So Yahya Zubir, I see the hand. So please take the floor and go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Mute. Hi, thank you for your presentations. I have a quick question. It seems that the AU is, well, it doesn't seem, it's reality, is going to send 3,000 troops to Mali. How do you see that impact upon, you know, what is already a crowded area with different groups, with the G5 and so on? Is it going to help? Is it going to complicate matters? Will it help in the security sector reform, or will it complicate it?
Go ahead, Bernardo, please. And yeah, go ahead and let's see if we find Nana.
Okay, thanks a lot for your comments and questions. I would like to start with Paul Melly's questions on the armies, on Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali's armies. I think that the categories, and maybe Nana can answer better than me, but maybe the categories that you mentioned that are often reported by international analysts are a little bit, let's say, frozen or too well defined. That's my impression, because I mean, there are several troubles with the Niger army as well. So perhaps some technical aspects, some extra related to salaries are better than in Mali, but overall some troubles out there, especially in terms of human rights violations. Also, if we read the MINUSMA report, well, we see that some problems are there. So I don't want to say that, I mean, it's hard to say that Niger is a good army and Mali is not good. That's really a shortcut that it's not helpful for reform. It's not helpful for analysis. That's my impression. So we have to get more into the nitty-gritty and to see what are the specific problems, limitations, challenges, and even results that have been achieved by each of them. Concerning DDR, we have analyzed these aspects, and we have seen how DDR is different at a different level as in Mali, so in different regions, and as DDR connected to the end of the civil war, and DDR launched in central Mali recently, that are completely different dynamics. The impression that we had, especially during some interviews, is that that some people will be glad to give up their weapons if they really gain a social position. So if they have a new employment, if they have opportunities, they will be glad to give up their weapons. We also heard about some people that were buying weapons in order to enter in the DDR process. It is it can look like crazy, but it demonstrates how to make the right offer, to involve the people in the right way, with concrete offers, with concrete social services, with a longer perspective is delivering. So indeed, social positions is a key issue related to DDR. And finally, about SSR, about Yahya questions on post-conflict and or not post-conflict. I think that yes, it's different because in SSR we have this situation. In Mali, for example, we have this situation that's really connected to the post-conflict, traditional post-conflict, UN post-conflict. However, in the region, we have a situation where, a different situation where it's hard to define what is post-conflict and what is not post-conflict. What is sure is that SSR should be connected to a political process. So for instance, in Mali, we wrote down in the recommendation to avoid a no peace, no war setting in that country, because political solution and implementation of the peace process is the core priority to work on security. And so the SSR should be not disconnected from the post-conflict peace process in that country. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernardo. Perhaps as Nana lost her connection, maybe, perhaps on the African Union deployment and the Army's professionalism, that question, perhaps Ottilia, you can make a comment of a very brief 1 minute. I see another hand, Rachele Cecchi. If the question is very short, very brief, and it can be responded in 1 minute, we go ahead with you after Ottilia, and then we will leave the floor to Uli. Thank you. Ottilia, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Asli. I think I would firstly just want to echo what Bernardo said around our assessment of the militaries, whether it's the direct assessment between the Malian and the Nigerian military and their various forces. I do agree that it isn't particularly useful to pit them against each other in that way, but to really have a holistic assessment of the professionalism, and then to be able to identify what gaps are there and what needs to be resolved in addressing the challenges those militaries face. On the AU deployment, and I'm going to share a link as I speak now, but last week, one of our senior researchers out of our office in Addis, who works specifically on AU standby force and responses, wrote a short opinion piece that looks at, you know, what would be useful going forward when it comes to this deployment. And I think the key message from his piece is actually, again, to re-stress this. It's about coherence, collaboration, and bringing order to an otherwise disorderly approach to dealing with problems. It's not so much about the numbers of troops that are being sent into the region. It is whether they're working together. And that's the current challenge that we're seeing, that they aren't necessarily working together all the time. And there's a need to bring things together in that regard. I'll end there.
Thank you very much for this brief comment. Rachele Cecchi, please, I kindly ask you to be very, very concise and direct the question, and then we will proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the presentations and the comments. It's been very interesting. My question perhaps cannot be really answered in a minute, but I'm just going to ask it anyways. Perhaps there is some feedback. And in very brief, in a very short, in a nutshell, my question is, as, for example, other state actors outside the EU are also interested in the area and want to contribute or take part in security matters, for example, the Russian Federation, I would like to understand more or less how, for example, the EU is interacting multilaterally and bilaterally with those kinds of actors.
Bernardo, you have 1 minute to respond to this question.
Yeah, sure, just very quickly. I mean, yes, there are several actors, and we focus on even on past research on the role of external actor to core, so even the others like Russians and China and the US. So there are other actors indeed, and superpower, let's say, are definitely engaged. We know that China is more reluctant to engage on peace and security, but its engagement is growing through multilateral actors mainly, so the UN, but not only. The Russian Federation is really cooperating, especially on military cooperation, and in this presence and this cooperation is really booming also in the Sahel. And then we have the US that historically, I mean, Yuri will conclude, so she can add more about that. but historically the US were not strongly interested to Africa. And now there is a debate about the future of the US cooperation on training, on fighting terrorism in Africa. The current US president has several times mentioned that he would like to withdraw and to reduce his engagement because it's more a European affair. But in practice, the effort has not been reduced, so the military bases are there. And the practical impression is that the engagement is on the ground and is still there and will continue, at least in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bernardo. And we are just on time. Now we have our 5-minute conclusion by ULRIKE RODGERS from the NDI. Uli, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asli, and thank you to all the contributions and questions. So I want to be very brief, just with a few comments on the research, and then also on what we are hoping to accomplish then in the future. Yeah, let me start off by thanking Yahi and FEPS for organizing this webinar. I think by now everybody is probably pretty much used to this form of working together, but we still hope that when we will have an opportunity in the not so far away future to come together in person again and talk about this, because that's one conclusion we have learned from and drawn from all the work. It is nothing can replace these invaluable in-person exchanges and the gatherings, and we were fortunate enough to be able to do that last year in Rome. And before then in Addis. Unfortunately, COVID-19 got in the way this year, but we hope that we'll be able to meet again soon. Let me just say a couple of things on the study and what we're planning on doing with it. As several people pointed out in their comments and remarks, the recommendations are progressive and they are fairly comprehensive. Of course, nothing can ever be all encompassing, but they do touch up on a variety of sectors. Not everybody may agree on all, and that is fine, because we hope that our contribution to this will encourage further debate and will provide food for thought to these ongoing discussions. And several people in the discussion pointed out how fluid this environment is, and that things that were taken for granted 1 week may be put in question again the following week. The analogy of the moving car, I think, is very appropriate. So we hope that the recommendations will provide food for thought and input into these conversations. In the Sahel countries themselves, particularly the 3 Lipta-Kogoma countries that NDI has focused on for the past 3 years, since 2014 in our work, but also, of course, in the United States and in Europe. So NDI, for its part, is going to disseminate the study very widely among our partners in 3 countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, where we have very active cooperation with a variety of partners. For example, the defense and security committees within the national assemblies of the 3 countries. And we're going to share the paper with them and hope to then also have the opportunity to discuss it in the 3 countries. You may know that we have offices in Ouaga and in Bamako and in Niamey, and so there will be opportunities for in-person conversations about that. We are also going to share it with the Lipta Kugoma Authority. You may be aware that I believe it was at the end of 2017 or perhaps early 18, the Lipta Kugoma Authority, which is an intergovernmental organization of the 3 countries, added a security mandate or a security segment to its mandate. So, and we talked about the multitude of actors. Here is another one that has recently joined the conversation. And we have been working with them, and we're going to continue that partnership as well. And we want to feed these recommendations into their work. There is also, as many of you certainly know, the 3 countries have now each a Center for Strategic and Security Studies that are closely working with the executive level, the governments in the 3 countries. They're somewhere midway between a research organization and think tank, but they're also in each case closely related to the security sector. So we're going to share it with them and discuss the conclusions and the recommendations. And last but not least, it was mentioned several times, the importance of inclusion of citizens. We have partnerships with a number of civil society organizations that are focusing on security sector reform in the 3 countries. And that will, of course, we will also share the work with them. And just by way of mention, I know that several of our country directors are online. As I mentioned, we have offices in the 3 countries. So if you happen to be in the Sahel, in one of the 3 countries, and you have the opportunity to stop by our office there, we have expertise and contacts throughout the country in this area, and we'll be, of course, always happy to share that and to share our knowledge, impressions, etc. But lastly, I want to also mention that the paper is going to be shared here, of course, in Washington very widely, United States Congress, the committees that focus both in the House and in the Senate on these issues, and the well-known think tanks and partners and NDI's partner institutions, such as the International Republican Institute and the Center for Security Studies, etc. So with that, I want to thank again the researchers. And I know that's not just the researchers, they're kind of the spearheads of this operation, but there was a whole army of people working on this behind the scenes. I want to thank in particular Elisabetta and Nicoletta for their very, very hands-on practical support. Elisabetta is really she's been the la plaque tournante, holding everything together, as always. And with that, thank you all for your contributions. And as I said, I hope that in 2021, we will be able to have an in-person meeting because the 3 partners in the coming weeks, we're going to put our heads together to see what we want to do with this project, but also where we want to go in the future. I think there is a large consensus that we're going to remain in the Sahel, as the issues there are not likely to go away anytime soon, and we will then let everybody know what our future joint activities are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uli, for looking forward to the future, continuing with the Sahel. Thank you all on my part and on the EI's part too, I guess, to all involved in this project and in this event today. FEPS, NDI, of course, the researchers, our discussant Ottilia Manganitze, and all the audience for participating in this event, and obviously, of course, also the our speakers in the introduction. Thank you very much.
Ashley, let me thank also Susanne from FEPS for her great work, for support for this publication and for the webinar. Thank you. And thanks, Ashley, for moderating. Great job.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you all and have a nice evening. Bye.